All right, now I'm recording. So Sente, talking about Sente this week or this month. Bidirectional communication library for Clojure and Clojure script. And I think let's go to the wiki, I guess. Breaking changes from 117 to 118.
There's a
Let's
getting
see.
Started one that maybe you want to.
Oh, we're 119. Okay. So we're past the breaking point. Here you go. Dependency. So setup, you need the Sente library. Server side, first you need to make sure you're using one of the supported web servers. Somewhere in your app's code, you already have a mechanism for routing in place for handling ring requests. If you're using Clojure, for example, you have something that looks like this. Looks pretty standard. For Sente, we're going to add 2 new URLs and set their handlers. So let's see. So here's the new. So we import or require Sente. And it's a little bigger so we can read. And then we need a web adapter. Oh, interesting. It's a let block that has defs inside. It's not a common pattern, I guess, but it's a way of making them all share the same state without making it global, I guess.
Could you maybe break that down a little bit just for somebody that's still kind of new to Clojure?
What down?
Just how that's not a usual idiom.
Yeah, usually defs are top level forms. That's just the convention. That's what most code has. And but in this case, it looks like this make channel socket server returns a bunch of functions. Like it generates a bunch of functions. And so you want to save those into variables or into vars so that you can refer to them. And so like for instance, Ajax post fn is saved as ring Ajax post so that you can then call ring Ajax post for requests that come in. So basically the post to CHSK is creating a new WebSocket connection. And so this is the handler for taking that new WebSocket connection and doing whatever Sente does with it behind the scenes. And so this is just how he's chosen to expose the set of functions that are generated. So
Yeah, that kind of construct is also used sometimes when you want to encapsulate some like an atom or something like that.
yeah.
And not have that atom visible outside, but only exposed through the defs.
Oh, okay.
Sort of like an object you could think of in an object-oriented language. We are
it's
encapsulating the data.
Yeah, it's an encapsulation. It's sharing the state among several functions without it's private data, like like you said, like an object.
Is there another way that you might express something like this? Like if this is a bit odd or whatever. Like, because I guess fundamentally what it's doing is it's just taking the result of make channel socket server and just like spreading it across multiple defs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But if you didn't have this let, like,
Other
I guess
ways
you
you
could
could
just
do this. Yeah.
store it in a single def, but then you'd have to have like, I don't know, some sort of like multiple level thing, right? Because it's effectively just a map, right?
Yeah. I mean, you could have it as one function that's like a multi-method that, you would call you would always anything you called it, you would have to give it a first parameter, and that's like what actual function to use, so to speak, what part of it. That would be one way. You could make it so that this was like behind a macro. So you could say like, make the Sente functions, and it would make vars, like make the Sente functions would as a macro would generate code that would, it's probably essentially do this right here, but it wouldn't be,
Right. So you wouldn't write it yourself in
Right.
that sense, but it would just like dump those things into your namespace for you.
Yeah. But the nice thing about doing it this way is you get to name these as the end user. And if the macro named them in a way that you wanted to change, then you have to add options to the macro to, like it's like makes it more complicated.
Right.
I think that in this way it's more like, hey, you called a function and here's some data back. The data is a bunch of functions, but you get to go ahead and do what you want with it, kind of thing. So I think it's simpler, I think, in that way. The macro might be cleaner, but macros are always like, you don't know what it can do, because it can do a lot more powerful things than just a function call.
I had stumbled across a def inside of a def in one of the solutions on exorcism to a fairly simple little problem. But I took to it because I was like, oh, that function really only needs to be used inside of this one function, but it couldn't be a lambda cleanly because it was used twice, and or maybe even 3 times. But I didn't realize it was unidiomatic. Looking through various other solutions to that same problem, I was like, oh, I like this little bit of stuff. That's why I dug in on like whether or not that was not really actually idiomatic.
And I think being or not being idiomatic can tend to be a little bit of a gatekeeping thing for languages. So I think that sometimes like idioms are just the most common way of doing things. It's not necessarily like a law. And so I think that in this case, one of those things is like sometimes I'll put a def inside of something if I'm debugging code and I want like this function is getting called from somewhere and I want to save some bit of the data out, like so that I can inspect it. So that's where I've usually used a def inside of a function, not even inside a let. It's actually worse. And so I think, yeah.
Oh, to clarify, I was using a defin inside of a defin. Is that not as odd as this case? Or are those
You're using
basically the same?
A defin or a def?
A defin inside of a defin. It was the case I had actually seen.
Oh, interesting.
It was defining a function inside of another function. That was just a utility function that was only needed by that function.
Oh, if it was only needed by that function, why wouldn't you use a let or something inside the the first outer defin? Because with the nested defin, you're polluting your global namespace with a function that's not used or needed anywhere else.
Oh, so that actually still exists at the top level?
Yeah.
Of that
Yeah.
namespace?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I knew this question would lead to a little bit of a. Okay, thank you. That's
and that's the same thing that this code is doing, right? Because if you didn't do it this way, you could do it. One of the ways of doing it is to say def foo, and then say Sente make channel socket server, and then destructure foo, the result of whatever the foo is, and make your own defs. But then now you've polluted your namespace with this foo, which you don't really need anywhere else. And that's all this is doing, is really hiding that, scoping
is,
it inside the let.
Yeah, it's hygienic. It's tidy.
Okay. What is there a particular book or online article, anything that kind of treats the like how, because the way I saw it, the code read cleanly to me, but I didn't actually realize the other semantic implications of like the namespacing and whatnot. And so maybe maybe I've gotten far enough now that I need to go back and do, like, instead of just picking and at problems, but like actually do a what am I trying to say? Like something that covers the topic of how namespaces work in such a way that like you know when you're reading some code what it's actually doing at that level.
If you go and look back at it and you feel that, I mean, I can't think of an example offhand where a defen inside of a defen would be my preferred way of doing something. So if you do come across a thing where it's needed, that would be interesting to know.
Yeah, I guess just something that covers the idea of like understanding that defen inside of a defen is actually a top level function. So why would you do it that way? Like
I
you might as
imagine
well.
maybe wherever def is explained, it probably says that it creates like a global binding. But I agree with you, like it is a bit of a mind bend compared to, I guess, pretty much any other language I've used, where like you can nest a def or a defen like arbitrarily deep in other forms, but it's not lexically scoped. Like it's still affecting that global
Yeah, but
namespace, right?
you could use something like a let or let fn.
Yeah, I'm just
If you
sort
want
of pointing out
inside,
that like
yeah.
it
If you want,
affects the global like namespace,
correct.
but it doesn't have to be at the top level. It always acts as if it's at the top level, I guess, like regardless of how deeply nested it is and what it's contained within.
That's true.
I think that's kind of like an interesting gotcha, I guess, if you're not expecting it.
Mm-hmm.
So where did you first learn that?
I don't remember. I feel like I saw something somewhere about like def just defines things top level.
Okay.
And so I just kind of assumed that it always like was at the top level. And I think I've seen this sort of let construct before in maybe some ring stuff. And I thought that was weird. And then it was sort of like, oh, like I guess it makes sense because it's just a form like any other form, and forms can be inside of forms. It's just that I guess semantically, def is about global definitions or like namespace level definitions. And it just does that one job regardless of where it happens to be. So let for locals, defs for globals. Even though here, like the let is like at almost like the global like level and the def is below it. They're still kind of working with that one and only semantic.
Yeah, I guess I was kind of reading it as a Clojure. And maybe the reason I thought that was fine was just that we use anonymous function all the time, and I assume that doesn't have the same problematic. Like I get
No, yeah, that's more like if you just have FN. It's the DE that makes it. The DEFN defen, it makes it a global. The FN just makes it a function.
FN makes a
literal.
function, but it doesn't actually bind it to anything at the top level. But defen does.
Whatever the name you give it, yeah, or the var name, yeah.
But the name you give it, it's not relative to the lexical scope. It doesn't, like, the naming isn't lexical. It captures the
scope that you're in. So you would, like this was like it.
So it is a
this
Clojure,
kind of captures.
but it's also named. But that name is bound in the normal namespace that it would have been regardless.
Right.
Okay.
I think if you look at the Clojure style guide, I think there's hints in there about defen use like not usually being something you put in other forms.
Okay, that's probably all I need to do then. I will say that a lot of those documents like that, you really do need to like spend at least a month just trying to make things work before you go and read that. Otherwise, you won't really absorb, you know.
Oh yeah, you don't have reference for the rules is kind of a harder word than I mean, but like the conventions, you're not going to understand them unless you've kind of bumped up against Clojure code and understand, yeah, a little more.
I do keep asking these questions, not just for my own benefit, but just for the sake of trying to eventually pay it forward in Clojure Camp. You know, I've just been really grateful there to have Raph as a mentor, and also Sean Corfield had done some mentoring there too, and you know, they just know a lot, and so when I get to the point where I could help people without leading them astray, I just want to make sure that I'm asking, you know, like that I'm not learning the wrong things. So I will actually be helpful.
Sure.
Anyways, thanks for the tangent.
Dora helpfully suggested that we can look at this code in the Sente clone. You go, oops, too far. Example project. So that's what I'm editing on the side over here. So there's our let. And he's using HTTP-Kit, the HTTP-Kit adapter. I'll load up a REPL here. So these are the two routes that we add, a get and a post. And let's see. There they are, the get and the post. So of course this has other, you know, routes in it. I haven't done Composure in a while. Most of the apps that I do nowadays are using Reatit, the Matosin library for routing. But I started off with Composure, so it's nice and declarative looking, I think. So relatively easy to understand. So the ring Ajax post and ring Ajax get or WebSocket handshake FNs will automatically handle ring, get, and post requests on our channel socket URL. Together, these will take care of the messy details of establishing and maintaining WebSockets or long polling requests. I think the get maybe is the one. I forget which if it's get or post that does the WebSocket initiation. But Sente uses long polling and Ajax requests if it can't do a WebSocket. So it's or long polling. I mean, not Ajax. So that it can pretend that there's a WebSocket there for connections that don't allow it or it's not stable or something like that. So, which I think is pretty cool. So, okay, so because he wants to add the CSRF, he adds a CSRF token. Is there a CSRF token here somewhere? Landing page handler. There you go. Okay, so that's the server side. So client side setup. You'll need something similar on your client side, which is client. Require macros, for core async stuff, and then Sente again. So you need to add this. Let's see. CSRF token. So it gets a so the CSRF token was put in the page, and then this uses it to make the make the WebSocket connection.
Any idea what the question mark at the front is supposed to imply?
That's a good question. Because this is a whenlet, I'm guessing that the question mark is like something that might be nil, like it might be there or not,
Kind of
as a
optional
convention.
type of thing,
Yeah, there you go, an optional or an option, like from Scala.
right?
A maybe CSRF token and
Right. I guess because question mark at the end implies a predicate. It's just at the front to indicate like a could be there, could be not.
yeah.
Interesting. Is that common? Have you seen that around in the wild, or
I haven't seen prefixes like that. Anyone else has seen those?
No.
There was something we saw last, I think it was in the Telomere meetup last month, and he had exclamation points at the end, and it didn't mean what I usually put exclamation point at the end for was like this does IO. And he had a different convention for that, and I forget what it was. I mean, he's got, like, for instance, set log level. Set the log level is got a bang at the end, so it's side effects too here. So
The prefix question mark is a data log-ish thing. But I don't,
Oh, okay.
I don't know why it's here. I think prologue is as well.
Oh yeah, okay. Been a while since I did any prologue.
I've never done any. I read a book once, but Dorab might know.
Okay, so after setup, client will automatically initiate a WebSocket or repeating long polling connection to your server. Client to server events are now ready to transmit over the CHCHSK, this channel. That one. Last step, you want to hook your own event handlers into this channel. Please see one of the example projects or API docs. So let's guess we don't need to go too wide. So let's just read through some of this. So here's the namespace, which has our adapter in it. He's using HTTPKit. Logging config. Set min log level. Oh, interesting. So this is like a way of setting the log levels for Sente and Timber. With one function call. So set to debug. Define our Sente socket channel. Let Packer. Oh, serialization format. So, oh, here we go. This is what Dorab was saying. This is your foo, right, Dorab? He's defing a server, and then he's unpacking it.
Yeah.
I wonder why if he uses this anywhere else. Nope, just those two places. But probably it's nice so you can as at the REPL, you can inspect it for things. So all the same things over here, Ajax posts, get a WebSocket channel. So you receive things through this channel, but you send things through this function. Connected UIDs, watchable read-only atom. And then cons. So it looks like maybe those are connections themselves. I don't know, I'm just guessing. Please, if you have other things to say, please don't hesitate to pop up. We can watch this atom for changes. Okay, so connected UIDs, it watches for changes so we can log when clients connect and disconnect. Okay. Got some hiccup for a web page. I'm just gonna glide right past, unless you want to read hiccup for that. Login handler, which is on post to login. Session. Okay. Main ring handler is probably used at the bottom to, yeah, for the web server. Okay. Some server to user async push examples. Broadcast sends a given event to all connected users. So it gets all the connected users and it does a do seek. Okay. Pretty straightforward. Test broadcast. Quickly broadcast 100 events to all connected users. Okay. Def once broadcast loop. I don't know what this is doing. I'm just going to skip over that. Def multi event message handler, multi-method to handle Sente's event messages. So the default is to say it's an unhandled event. CHSK UID port open, user connected, UID port close is disconnected. So it sends you events when clients connect and disconnect. That's kind of cool. Test broadcast. So when it gets the message test broadcast, it sends a test broadcast. Broadcast loop. Wonder if the website is going to show us what this is. So yeah, let's see. This example dives into Sente's full functionality pretty quickly. Probably more useful than a reference as a tutorial. Please see for a gentler introduction. Okay. Without a REPL, line start. Okay, let's with a REPL. Call line start dev at your terminal. This will start a local nREPL server. Okay. Connect your dev environment over. So we'll go back to the server. Oh, bet this is doing some Clojure script compiling and stuff. Yeah, CLJS build is what it's doing. Wonder what it's using for. Oh, just Clojure script. No, Big Wheel or what was the other one? CLJS. So I disconnected. Open the server CLJ, which I did. You have environment eval example server start. Start. Hey, there we go. So we got all kinds of information. Let's see. In the terminal, we have newer server WebSocket. Server will send handshake to connected UUIDs change. So now Sente nil UID. User connected, no user ID, didn't have a login session. Okay. Connected IDs, broadcasting server to user to one UID. Oh, here's an unhandled event, broadcast. Broadcast pushed into asynchronously from the server. Wow. It's a lot to take in, huh? Okay, what's the README say next? Open it, follow the instructions from that page. Okay. A random Ajax auto connection has been established. See client output. I wonder if this is let's put this bottom. Channel CHSK now open. Okay. To re-randomize, hit your browser's refresh button. Server output is standard out. Client output is the text area or browser console. Okay. So we're getting broadcasting from the server. Standard controls. Send with reply. Wow. Unhandled event, example button 2. Had a callback? Indeed. Server will reply with message from, okay. So it says unhandled event. So that hit this. Unhandled event. It hit this multi-method up here. Okay, and then a send without reply. set this real quick. So now Conjure's not going to get not as much stuff. Okay, so if I go and I hit the send again, unhandled event, had a callback, nope. Okay. Test broadcast to server to user async push. So that sent 100 messages. I guess if I now there's 2 of us. So if I hit the test broadcasts, it sends it to both of them. Toggle broadcast loop. Oh, that I see. So that stops this broadcast loop coming in. And so if I stop it over here and start it up over here, now it's both places. So even though both have a nil UID ID or identifier, Sente has 2 different WebSockets open, so it's able to address them individually. Let's see. And then the UIDs change, so it still just has the one UID. So I think if you try to send to the nil UID, you would get everyone because Sente can't know what you are. Interesting. So let's see, I'll log in with user ID browser1. And what did we get on here? Have the UIDs change? There's browser1 and nil ID. So let me log in with browser2 over here. So now I have browser1 and browser2 as the connected clients. We get a user connected. So user connected would only show up if here user connected. So these are the events that were done on this on the server side. So we can see over here, where's the buttons that do, I want to see what these buttons look like toggle broadcast loop. Oh. Toggle broadcast loop. Oh, here you go. So it attaches a click handler to it. There it is. So it sends this message. Wonder what chk send. Interesting. And then this is the callback reply. So that's why when you hit this, it says now enabled or disabled. That's the client saying, I got a response from the server saying that yes, it was done. Oh, look at this. When callback success, CB reply, let enabled the reply. And so I wonder if the server reply loop enabled. So it's sending this value true back to the client, and then the client knows to show either disabled or enabled, but because that's what the reply was. Okay, I've talked for a while. What do you guys think? Any questions? Anything we want to explore or talk about? Or
So I guess if I'm understanding right, all of these events are effectively just you define them yourself based on what you send or what you've decided to send over the CHSK send call from the client. Like it's
for
not
here,
anything special, right?
I don't think so. I mean, so here is the test broadcast. And so it sends, this is the event that it sends. It's just a vector with a single keyword. So example test broadcast. And then if you look on the server, example test broadcast. I mean, it doesn't actually use any data. You didn't send any data other than the event name, right? What's the, I wonder what the, let's see.
So I guess it's some sort of object, I guess, because the dispatch function is the ID
Yeah.
keyword, right? So I guess you could pass arguments along with it.
Do timber info F message str. So if I hit this, did
That's
that
on the
actually do
server
anything?
side, though.
Test broadcast. Oh, this is the one I wanted. I thought it would show.
Nothing there.
There's message. Oh,
Yeah, because the client didn't send anything.
PR. A PRSDR is what we want. That will return a string representation, right?
Right. But I don't, it's whatever was passed as an argument to this event, and nothing was passed, so you're getting nothing.
It should at least be a map with an ID, right? Because that's
I would
the
think so.
I don't think
def
you're
multi.
getting anything.
So the right here, the multi is based on :ID. So the event, the whatever is being dispatched has to be something that has :ID, which would I assume be a map, right? But I mean, look here. Here's message : nothing.
Go to the client side and send something along.
Yeah, message is showing us nothing.
Oh, Because you need a format thingy in your
Ah.
string.
Gotta love it. You're right. Okay. Now that we're learning how to. Okay, so test broadcast. Oh, maybe it's not going to show up there. There it is. There it is. If this is going to work. Hey, look at that. It did. Okay, so this is what we get. There's the ID. There's the event. We got our ring request, which is most of it. The UID. Oh, look, it's got a reference to all of the connected users. Huh. So if you had like a chat program and it's like, hey, I want to send to other users, I got all their IDs here, I can just go push to them.
Data at the top. I guess that would be like anything you wanted to send along with the event.
Now let's see if we can
Nice.
do send some data. Meetup. So well, let's do what is the bit that shows the event? Colon event. Okay, so we'll do that one. Wait, which one did I do? I did test broadcast. So that'd be this one up here. I gotta remove this thing. Okay, so if I hit test broadcast loop. Oh, sorry. Test broadcast message is, oh, it doesn't have the true in it. I bet I have to do, I don't think this is automatically watching the client code to recompile it. So let me do that again. Come on, old computer, let's go. Uh-oh, it didn't open a new window. Oh, I had to start. That's what it is. There we go. There we go. Okay. So now if I do test broadcast, yeah, there you go. Messages, example, there's the, and then meetup true. Let's do the whole message and see if there's anything else that is involved there.
So does that get bound to anything, or do you have to unpack it?
Yeah, let's try.
Maybe look at the data field.
Let's try this. I captured the whole message again. Hey,
Yeah,
data.
data.
I see. So that's why it's called question data, because it might not be there.
Right. Interesting. So you can just
Yeah.
send whatever stuff you need through, and then it's just a multi-method on
For
the event
dispatching.
name you chose, and then you just pull out data and do whatever.
It is nice that it's on its own. You don't have to you have to parse it out of the event structure there.
And then what was reply function? That's like some
So
sort of
that,
callback, right? But
yeah, there's one of these that's got this send with reply. And so let's put the
Toggle had it.
so I do with reply, and it's an unhandled event. So let's put this print right here up in the, oh, it already has like a unhandled event. Had a callback indeed, but let's put the whole thing in there. There you go. Reply FN.
So that was just like where on the client side it had that result callback, or like
Yeah, let's
reply
look.
callback thing.
Button, send with reply. So you do
Then,
send and you have a callback.
right. So somehow that the fact that there was a function on the client side
Yeah.
is communicated to the server side, and then you're effectively calling that function on the server side to send something to the client, which then calls the actual client side
Yeah.
function. Okay.
It's kind of it's
Kind of like
like
RPC type of,
oh, definitely.
gives me Corba vibes.
It serializes the request and then it, yeah. I mean, obviously it doesn't serialize the function, but you're right. It's
Right.
sending things back and forth so fast that it feels like it is callback reply.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. So you have to know, you kind of have to know, I guess, like what the function looks like on your client side so that you know how to call it on the server side with like the right information, I guess, right? Because we saw in the other case that it was assuming that the callback reply was a Boolean or something like that,
Yeah.
or whatever it was.
I wonder if the reply FN is like, because it's sending back a single map. I wonder if it's like it's only one thing, or if you can send back multiple things, like multiple
Like a
parameters.
single argument, you mean?
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah, a single argument. That's the programmer way of saying it. That's a good one. But you're right, because this one's sending back a map and the other one sent back a Boolean. So you have to know on the client side what you're expecting back, right? Yeah. Huh. It's definitely very high level. Like you didn't even get to touch the WebSocket or the long polling or anything like that. Like the stuff I've done with WebSockets has been a lot more raw, where you do have a WebSocket and then the stuff you layer on top. I mean, it was similar messaging, but you had to know that it was only WebSocket. It wasn't fallback. Like this is really cool because it falls back on long polling if you don't have a WebSocket, you know.
Yeah, I think this is actually somewhat analogous to TRPC from the TypeScript world.
Did you say gRPC?
T as in
Oh, it's a
TypeScript.
T. Oh,
Yeah, and it's TypeScript specific, just like this is Clojure specific. It assumes same language on both sides.
TypeScript on. Oh, right. Server side would be a Node, right?
Yeah, it would have to be Node, I think. I mean, I guess there's alternatives to Node now, like Bun or Dena. I'm not actually. Those are just drop-in replacements, though, right? It's still the Node
Okay.
model.
Mhm.
This seems like it's way more like TRPC just feels like a regular method call, or not even method, but like just they call them procedures, but you know, in our world, I guess they're functions.
Mhm.
But it's not very flexible in terms of like this callback. It seems like this is more capable, but it seems like that comes at a huge price in terms of like the amount of overhead you have to understand a bunch of things first.
Mhm. I mean, I do agree there's a lot, but like this, all of this stuff goes in. In fact, I probably would assume that in a real application, I would have this event handler multi in a different namespace, like the web that would handle all the setting up of Sente and everything. And then the multi method would be in like a event namespace so that it was separate. And so when I'm in there and on the client side, you're only thinking about events in a general, like it takes care. Once you have it set up and running, you don't really have to, hopefully you have to,
Yeah, I
you know,
think
mess with it
that
very
part
much.
is pretty analogous to TRPC in that every procedure they call them that you want to make accessible across the wire, you have to register it with a TRPC router, and you do end up creating more than one router. And like the idea of how you break that down as far as your API, like why do you put a bunch of procedures together in one router? Why do you break it into multiple routers? It is a similar feeling here in that there, it is a certain choice, like almost aesthetic is term. Depends on your business domain, I guess. But the part about trying to understand like what you're going to get on the other end, I think is I think that's where this one, it's way more flexible because it really leverages the dynamicity of these languages, you know, Clojure and ClojureScript. Whereas TypeScript is much more of a straitjacket. And so everything that you're going to say and as far as like passing arguments is all like just like you know what the types of everything are going to be. And
Is it more like RPC where you're invoking, it looks like you're invoking a function like this, like it
yes,
feels like you're sending a message, but that is it more like you're invoking a function?
that one, yeah, TRPC is much more like just old school RPC.
Like XML RPC in the old days. Maybe I'm dating myself, but I did a lot of that stuff. XML RPC was just, yeah, it was like a wrapper. It felt like calling a function call, except for there was a network hop in the middle there somewhere.
I mean, I think even like predating that, like RMI is you know more sophisticated, right? Because you can pass instances of things that
Uh-huh.
the client didn't know about yet, and it can serialize that and then pass the class definition over the wire and then I don't remember exactly how RMI worked, but I feel like that one had a bit of dynamic nature to like what classes could be on either end. Whereas TRPC, it's like it's all just JavaScript in the end. But the TypeScript type checker, because you can't use TRPC without TypeScript. So at build time for the project, it does leverage those types, and it enforces them. But the runtime doesn't have to be as complicated as like Java, in the sense that like if you wanted to have a particular instance of a particular type, you'd have to actually make sure that type was present in the class loader for Java. So I think we would have to back up to just like, I don't know, like even Corba is too complicated to really kind of but like Corba has like all this, like you have to define the interface with its own little DSL. Whereas TRPC, it's like it just takes advantage of structural typing. It's like if you return something from a procedure on the server side, and you go into the React code and you write something that calls to that, it just knows what all that stuff is because of the TypeScript passing the structural typing along. Like you don't necessarily even have a declared named type for that stuff. You're like, well, I created an object that had these keys in it, and so that's your type. But it enforces it. Like you can't, like the TypeScript on the client side code also has to see it that way. And I think that's why it seems simple. It's like a lot of the magic going on under the hood, whereas this one's exposing more of the dynamic nature of things, I guess. I'm trying to wrap my head around why this feels onward, like it feels complicated, and I'm like, it's kind of bumming me out that like usually like 90% of the time Clojure, I'm just like, oh, this would be easier to use than TypeScript, but this actually seems a little bit more complicated for some reason.
Yeah, I can understand.
I'm unfamiliar with coding a lot between the browser and the server, but every time I try, there's a lot of naming that you have to choose. And so when you're just working with function names on both sides that match, that takes away a lot of the naming. But my guess with experience, you kind of don't want to do that. I think you do want a layer of renaming events and directing them to server-side functions. So
Yeah, it
I don't
depends
know.
on your yeah. I see what you mean.
So with the gRPC type style, like it kind of takes away some of that option. So you have to, I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming it would add complexity at some point. And this is just acknowledging that right away. And you have to build up your model about how you're going to send events to the server instead of just talking about functions.
Right, and it's a very event oriented, and you can send events from the client, and then the server can send events to one or more clients. And so it's very much like a web of interconnected connections than it is like just, air quotes, just an RPC. Because if you have just an like RPC, how would you do a broadcast from the server to all your connected clients? Because unless they were like long polling somehow, like this feels like it's a little more distributed computing minded than TRPC would be.
Right. Huh. Well, something to think about. I know the Hoplon project is super old, but it does have more of a RPC flavor at some point. But I don't think they have WebSockets yet.
Yeah. I just saw this broadcast at the bottom here. So there you go. Of course, we only have one server connected, but we connected a second one. Let's see. Always feels kind of magical.
The callback function thing, I guess arguably is not really even necessary, right? Because like you could just, like the server could handle a message it receives by just sending a message to the same client that sent the original message to it. And then
Yeah, it
that
feels like a
client would
little
just
bit of a, yeah.
handle it, right? But I guess like maybe there could be some sort of races there, or it's, you're kind of looking at different places now in the code to trace that flow rather than just saying like send this and handle the response like directly in one place.
I think you make a good point about it being ordered, because a lot of stuff in JavaScript, like there's only one thread, and so you don't know if the next one's gonna, like you know, things might get out of sequence.
Right.
And so having it like this, where where was it, like this, you know, this is gonna get called after that. It's a little more rendezvous kind of semantics instead of, you know, like disconnected things. And I think sometimes in application you might want the disconnected side, but this one you might want something a little more, at least feel synchronous,
Right.
even though I know it's not.
I thought it was interesting that, you know, you have the data part, right? Like sending messages. It's this data varying back and forth, and that seems to be like a really big idea, I guess, in the Clojure community. Like it's just data. We just send data around, right? Data for routing, data for describing a web page, data for all the things. And then here it's like the data goes to this across the WebSocket. You have the multi-method dispatch, but then you have this weird like function thing that sort of, but not really, like flows across that connection too, right? And so I thought that's kind of interesting. But maybe it is sort of like a concession for the environment where like we need to make sure that this response is handled like directly in this spot. And we know that it's the response for this particular send. No ambiguity, no interleaving or anything like that.
I would imagine it's particularly useful for things like, I need to fetch this data from the server. And so there's no need for it to be like a broadcasted anything with a different, like, I'm just going to react to it, you know. It's more like a traditional, it's almost like layering a traditional web request on top of this WebSocket. Because WebSockets are really useful for asynchronous and broadcast and that kind of stuff, but sometimes you just need a web request. You know, you just need, you know, an old-fashioned get me this data kind of thing.
I think the callback is probably also useful for like acts, where you want to acknowledge that you got the message.
Oh yeah, like you sent a command to the server.
Yeah, because it's all asynchronous, right? So it could be.
Who knows?
Is this all asynchronous?
I get the sense that
think
it
so.
is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's core
That's
async,
actually an
right?
important
Async.
point then. Because I think that this is maybe a lot more powerful than gRPC, because now that I think about it, there's really no way to have updates that are a result of something that you send a message to send a message back. It's just a call, and it feels essentially like you make the call and then you wait for it to be done. I mean, it can be async in the sense that when you wait for the call, you do that in an async wrapper, just because JavaScript doesn't have any other threads. So you have to do that, but you're not,
Right.
yeah, but there's no like, oh, I'll do this, and then there'll be a back and forth, like a conversation. Like you just basically have to depend on the usual React type of, like, if you send all your updates as pushes, and then just have a React query that will like, you don't update your UI with the things that you're sending. You actually like do it more of a CQRS type of thing, where it's like you just send all your events in, and then who knows what else got sent from other clients. And so you're always querying to see if anything changed.
You're just reacting to changes from the server, which would be more the not callback style, right?
But yeah, it's not a callback, and those things tend to have to be, they tend to have to pull one way or another, unless you go out of your way to set up some other thing that knows that you're going to be sending. Like, there was this whole other thing called Pusher that we had to use in order to send out messages when we knew that they could be changing quickly, based on other things that were happening somewhere else in the system. And I think you could do that whole bit of functionality with just this, with just Sente.
Yeah.
You could do both things, and that you like TRPC would really couldn't help you with the other use case. So I think I'm coming around to the idea that this is maybe a steeper learning curve, but it's more powerful overall, and there's really no way to do that other thing like, it's not a good fit for Clojure anyways, because it was mostly just trying to leverage the structural typing to make it convenient.
Right.
Because you expect it, because it's, specifically designed to fit into the TypeScript world, where everybody wants to know all the type, like what keys are in your object, essentially. And that's just not necessary in Clojure. But there's a whole bunch of other things that you really ought to be able. I think a more interesting question, instead of comparing this to TRPC, might be like, how does this feel versus electric?
I mean, this definitely allows more control over what happens than electric does. Electric is definitely a higher level, but I feel like it's because it gets to the point where it's even managing the messages now. Like, in this one, you control the domain of messages and the reactions to them, but you don't control the WebSocket. Like, so there's something lower level, which would just be a WebSocket, but you have to, like, do a lot more of the serialization and that kind of stuff. But then I think electric is higher on the spectrum because it's just a single code base, and whatever, it handles all the reconciliation, very sophisticated reconciliation, remember, but you have no control.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on that general assessment. It's kind of a testament to electric to look at this in comparison and then think, God, it seemed simple to use electric. At least walking through the examples, I didn't find myself questioning, like, what does that do? Even though it's actually doing quite a lot of magic, like way more than this. But but the way that the code that you would write as a user of electric just sort of like, just felt like, oh yeah, okay. Like, maybe it's not as easy to write it because you don't know where to look. Like, when you're like, how do I do this next thing? But when you read it, you were like, oh, I know what this does. Whereas this, I'm like, what is it doing? I don't understand. But I guess the main question is that if there's bugs anywhere, like, does this give you the escape hatches? Like, can you work around problems in the levels below you? Whereas in electric, we know we just, given the way that it's built on top of missionary, like, there can't be any bugs in that lower level stuff. You're not going to be able to work around that. Like, it just expected that stuff is 100% correct.
Right.
But if this doesn't give you any escape hashes either, or any way to work around it, and it would have to be a fix in the library, then I start to wonder, I was like, when do you reach for this versus electric? Because it's really just the semantic model that you're trading off, not like, oh, well, because if you can reach down and fix things, then it's like maybe it's more pragmatic in the sense of like, unless electric is just fully baked, this would allow you to like not pull your hair out when you realize that you know something's broken lower level, and like, oh, there's a way around it. You know, it'll be a little bit ugly, but like we can just make this work. Whereas with electric, you're like, please fix this bug.
Cool.
But if this is similarly hobbled by bugs, like you just have to wait for them to fix it, I start to wonder, like, when would you choose this semantic model over electric? If that's the only trade-off.
Well, I definitely think it depends on if you want that control. Like, I feel like the level of applications that I would write I would want this level of control because I want to not manage the WebSocket, but I do want to know when things go over the wire. And with electric, you wouldn't know. So you couldn't have like a specialized client-side data cache that you query for things, because electric, it handles knowing where that's supposed to be already. And so you benefit, but you don't have control. So that's always the way it is with higher level abstractions. Higher level abstractions give you less control, but more
Yeah,
convenience.
I think I understand what you're saying now. You really have to fit your application within the electric model a certain way, and this is like a lot more flexible.
Yeah. Well, cool.
Okay. Yeah.
Any final thoughts? Think you'll use this for your next project or anything? Or I'm a fan. I'm a fan of this approach. I think it's a good, especially because I first used it like years ago, and it seems like it's pretty much just been a stable, like hasn't reached farther, which is good. I think it's good because it's that's what it does. It doesn't have to do anything else. So I'm a fan.
Yeah, I kind of like the fact, like I was looking at some WebSocket examples, sort of like how to set stuff up. And there's definitely like a lot of pieces around it, around like the error handling and like when the connection's established and it's closed and stuff like that. So I kind of like that that's figured out, and like it just once you slapped up the boilerplate in there, it seems like all that remains is just figuring out what events you want to send back and forth, and that's just like application specific stuff. So I kind of like
You
that.
can live at that level.
Yeah.
Pretending like the WebSocket doesn't exist. Or it's handled. You know it exists, just it's handled. Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
But also, like Nate, what you said was that it also seems to provide you with notifications of state changes that are happening at the lower levels. So if you choose to handle it, you can.
Yeah, and you also know, so you can react appropriately for your application. Yeah. Cool. Well, I think that was fun. Thank you all for participating, and we'll see you in August. Have a good month.
Bye.
You too.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you for leading us through that. It's a little complicated, but I think I started to come around at the end.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.